Bass fills. It can be hard to come up with interesting bass fills. For many bassists, fills don't go much further than basic running through minor pentatonic scales, a la Geezer Butler or John Entwistle. So you might get something like this. Or even a longer fill like this. Now, there's obviously nothing wrong with that, and in a rock song, that might be absolutely the right thing to do. If that's what you're hearing, that's what you should play. But there are a ton of ways that you can come up with different lines, and in this lesson, we're going to look at a cool way of creating fills that also provides you with a method for applying all of those pesky scales and modes. Want to know how to use a Dorian mode? Or a Mixolydian mode? Or maybe even a Phrygian mode? Well, this is going to help a lot. Now, there is one little thing that you're going to need to know about before moving into all of the good stuff, and that's the basics of using intervals from within scales. So let's take a good old C major scale as an example, starting here at the 3rd fret of the A string. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B. So if you've never played a C major scale before, we've got that 3rd fret, 5th fret A string, 2nd, 3rd and 5th fret on the D string, 2nd, 4th and 5th frets on the G string. But I'm guessing you've all probably played a C major scale before. So once you have a scale like that under your fingers, you can start to build third intervals from each degree of the scale, which is going to sound like this. Now, many of you will have played that kind of exercise before, but if that's totally new to you, all you have to do is take the first note C, work up 3 notes, C, D, E, and that's our first third, C to E. So that's a major third. Then we start on the 2nd degree, the D, and we do the same thing, D, E, F, so D to F, that's a minor third. And then if we create those thirds from every scale degree, slowly we get C to E, D to F, E to G, F to A, G to B, A to C, B to D, and then we're back at C. So. And that gives us a sequence of thirds there. Major third, minor third, minor third, major third, major third, minor third, and back. So you can play that as an exercise, both working up and down, just as I showed before. And down. Then, if you want to work up and down the fretboard a little more fluidly, we can work up through those thirds with root notes on the A string. So that might sound like this. Then you could play around with them a little more rhythmically, like this. Or you can just play around up and down them like this. So that's the basic idea of creating thirds from a major scale. Next, we can start looking at other scales and modes, and that's where today's lesson comes into play. This lesson is taken from the Creative Bassist course that's finally been released over at Talkingbass. There's a 25% discount for this week of release, and the sale finishes this weekend. The course is a huge 6 modules in length and covers every aspect of bassline creation, jamming, riffs, fills, and eventually moves into melody playing and solo improvisation. If you've ever wondered how bass players can write riffs and lines on the fly while jamming with others, this is the course for you. Today's lesson is from Volume 2. There's a huge downloadable ebook containing all the lesson material as well as backing tracks for practice, so just click the link in the description for more details. And now, let's get into some cool fills. In the last lesson, we looked at creating and making use of diatonic thirds from a scale. Now, thirds are a good start, but we can also play 4ths, 5ths, 6ths, 7ths, or any interval, including 10ths, 11ths, and more. So for this lesson, let's take a different scale as our basic palette. Let's use the C Dorian scale. Now this is a great mode for working on characteristic intervals. So for that C Dorian, we can create diatonic thirds, just as in the last lesson. Just build a third from each scale degree. But we can also look at 4ths. So let's try creating 4ths from that C Dorian. Instead of playing the C here at the 3rd fret of the A string. Let's play it here at the 8th fret of the E string, which is going to give us a little bit more real estate, so we'll be able to see these intervals a little bit better. So we start at that C. We've got C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat, C, or we could actually use the 3rd down here and the 6th down here. So C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat, C. So we can use the E flat there at the 6th fret of the A string. We can use that A there at the 7th fret of the D string. Just giving us a different fingering, but it's going to be probably a little bit better for working up through those fourths in one position. So now let's build a diatonic fourth from each of those scale degrees. So we start at that C there, work up, C, D, E flat, F. It's a perfect fourth. Then from the D, D, E flat, F, G, again, it's a perfect fourth. Then from the E flat, work up, E flat, F, G, A, that's an augmented fourth. Okay? Then we work up to the F, F, G, A, B flat, perfect fourth. Then from the G, G, A, B flat, C, perfect fourth. Then from the A, B flat, C, D, perfect fourth. And then finally from the B flat, C, D, E flat, perfect fourth. So they're all perfect fourths apart from building from that minor third there where we have the augmented fourth. So you can just, if you know the sequence, you can just work through on each note of that Dorian scale, just playing each of the fourths in turn. So like I said, the only fourth to look out for is that one built on that minor third. All you have to think for the rest of them is perfect fourth. So that's them in one position, but as we've seen in the previous lessons, it can be more useful to start seeing them up and down the fretboard in a more horizontal fashion. So if we take that sequence of fourths, remember that the one built on the third is going to be an augmented fourth. We can just work up and down on that A and D string. So if we look at the notes of the C Dorian first, C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat, C. Get those notes under your fingers first. You want to know the notes that we're working from, and then you just use the appropriate fourths. So, perfect fourth on C, perfect fourth on D, augmented fourth on E flat, perfect fourth on F, perfect fourth on G, perfect fourth on A, and then perfect fourth on B flat. And then we're back to C. And then you can just play them up and down. So now let's try a fill making use of those fourths. And again, just as in the last lesson, we're going to make use of some ghost notes to create 3 and 4 note groupings. So first of all, let's have a look at the groove that we're going to play. So that's going to sound like this. So obviously this is a groove making use of C Dorian. So we start with a rhythm of, we've got the 2 16th notes, 16th note, rest 16th note. So 1 E and then the A. So 1 E and A. All on that C 3rd fret of the A string. Then we've got a ghost note on the offbeat 16th note. Then we've got A to B flat, 2nd to 3rd fret on the G string, 8th notes. Then we just have this E flat here at the 6th fret of the A string sliding back down, and that's on the final quarter note. Then the second bar is exactly the same, but instead of the E flat, we have a little ghost note leading into B flat, B natural, back to the C. 1st, 2nd frets on the A string leading back into the C. So. Okay, so now let's try the fill making use of these fourths. So for that fill, slowly we have. So we're working down through the fourths, F to C, E flat to B flat, C down to G, B flat down to the F, E flat down to the B flat, and then we've got a little B natural just to lead us back into the C. So remember, it's the same fret for the perfect fourth. These are all perfect fourths. Same fret on the A and D strings each time. So it's going to be 15th fret, 13th fret, 10th fret, 8th fret, 1st fret, and then 2nd fret leading back in. But in between each one, we're going to have a ghost note. So very, very slowly. So you can just use the first finger for all of these, which makes it very, very easy. So you've got that first finger barring across. Just shift the pressure from the, let's say we're on the 15th fret there for the F to the C. Use joint barring, so use that joint there. You're holding down the finger with the pressure on that joint, and then just release pressure underneath and apply pressure with the fingertips. So that's called joint barring. So I'm just slightly curling the finger when I move onto the A string. Now if it's flat when I'm on the D string. So I'm not barring, I'm not playing them both down at the same time. I'm actually, even though it looks like it, I'm actually just shifting the pressure. So I'm kind of just rocking it slightly. Okay, so then ghost note, go. So again, try that really, really slowly until you've got it under your fingers, and then you can try it with the track. And just as one last technical tip, when you're playing the riff, we have the E flat just before we play the fill. You don't have to slide down, you can actually slide up slightly. So we've got the... Okay, so now let's look at fifths. So if we build fifths from that C Dorian scale, again in this position, we can start at the root note, the C. We work up 5 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We get the G. That's a perfect fifth. Then from the D to A, again, it's a perfect fifth. You might notice that I'm using a different fingering here. It's not the standard perfect fifth fingering. We looked at those in volume 1. It's an alternative fingering. So that there that I'm playing, that is a perfect fifth. Then from the E flat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a perfect fifth. From the F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a perfect fifth. From the G, it's a perfect fifth. And then from the A, it's a diminished fifth. Then B flat, it's a perfect fifth. So they're all perfect fifths apart from the fifth built from that 6th degree of the Dorian scale, and that's a diminished fifth. So that's the one to look out for. So now playing those on a single string. So remember, we have C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat, C. Really learn those notes of that C Dorian there on that single string. Then you can just work through that sequence of fifths. So remember, the only one to look out for is the 6th degree where we had the diminished fifth. All the rest are perfect fifths. So perfect fifth, perfect fifth, perfect fifth, perfect fifth, perfect fifth, diminished fifth, perfect fifth, and then we're back. And remember, we don't have to just limit ourselves to the A and D strings. We can play them on the E and A strings, or the D and G strings. And the D and G strings, they're pretty good for playing these fills, and they're what we're going to use on the next fill. So just familiarize yourself. C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat, C, if you can get that high. Just work up through those perfect fifths. Remember, we've got that diminished fifth there on the A. Just familiarize yourself with those fifths on that on those two strings, and then you can try this next fill. So for this fill, we're moving all the way up here. We've got that perfect fifth built on the F there, so it's C down to the F. So 17th fret on the G string and then 15th fret on the D string. There's that perfect fifth. We're descending through these fifths. Then the B flat down to the E flat. So remember, we're putting that ghost note in between. It's the groupings of 3. Then we've got the G down to the C. So 12th fret on the G string, 10th fret on the D string. Down a whole step again, F down to the B flat, 10th fret G string, 8th fret D string. So then D down to the G, so 7th fret G string, 5th fret on the D string, and then we just finish off with E flat down to the D, 6th to the 5th frets on the A string, just to finish off. So, and we're back down to the C. So again, start out really slowly with this, getting that ghost note in there, and then just gradually build up speed. So, one more time with the track. And just as one last tip regarding these ghost notes, remember you can actually make use of open strings, and often I actually do use open strings, you know, even when I'm showing these ghost notes, because when you're moving down at speed, sometimes you just don't get the hand there in time, or, you know, because you're working at speed, it doesn't really matter. They're just in passing. So I played an open string there. So with open strings, it would sound like this if I highlight the open string. You don't want to do that. That's highlighting that open D string. But when just playing them lightly in passing, you know, maybe even going for the ghost note, you can get away with it. It's fine. Now, lastly, let's have a look at some sixths. Now, we could carry on for ages with this. We could look at sevenths and tenths and 11ths and all different kinds of intervals, but we'll stick at sixths for now. You know, you can always work on all the other intervals in your own time. So, we're going to work through this Dorian. Again, starting at the 8th fret there, let's build some sixths. So, first of all, we've got the C, we work up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's that major sixth, okay? It's a characteristic scale step in the Dorian. It's what differentiates it from the natural minor. If you're on a natural minor, we've got that sad, minor sixth. But in the Dorian, we've got that brighter major sixth, which is why you get it. You get it in a lot of slap lines, you get it in a lot of funk stuff. It's that little lead into that seventh. So now we have that major sixth on C, we can move on to the D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Gives us a minor sixth. Then E flat, it's a major sixth. F, major sixth, then up to the G, minor sixth, then up to the A, minor sixth, and then the B flat. We get the major sixth again, okay? So, totally different sequence to, you know, the major scale, let's say. You just have to learn that sequence of sixths, and then you can start creating fills. So, now let's try building sixths with root notes on the A string. Now, this time, we're going to actually be making use of the A and G string, because as we get into these wider intervals, you have to, you know, you can start moving across 2 strings, but it's a lot easier if you play them across 3. So, for the sequence, we have major sixth, minor sixth, major sixth, minor sixth, minor sixth, major sixth, and then we're we're back to the major sixth at the top. So again, major sixth, minor sixth, then major sixth, major sixth. So on the third and the fourth there, we've got those major sixths. Then we've got two minor sixths. We've got the built on the fifth and the sixth. And then for the final one up at the B flat, the flat 7, we've got the major sixth. And then we're back up to the major sixth. So it's worth getting used to these in terms of small combinations. You know, so if I'm on this C Dorian, I know that the root note is a major sixth, and then that flat 7 we've got a major sixth again. So we can match them both up, and that's a good way of learning them. Then remember that we've got the G and the A. Again, take them as a combination of 2. So then the flat third and the fourth. Again, we've got a combination of 2 major sixths. So see what I'm doing here? I'm looking at 2 major sixths, then I'm looking at 2 minor sixths, and then 2 major sixths, and then just on that second we've got the minor sixth. So that's on the third and the fourth. So now let's try a fill making use of some of these sixths. So for this riff we have... So we're just working down through the sixths from the C at the 15th fret of the A string. So this is the root note, you know, of the chord, but we just play up. So you could add the ghost note in there if you want, but it can get a little bit tricky when you're crossing these strings. So you don't really need to do that. So we're just going to play the 2 notes and then a gap. So we've got a 16th note rest where we would have had the ghost note before. Then we come down to the next sixth on the B flat, which is a major sixth, up to the G at the 12th fret of the G string. Then down to the A, 12th fret of the A string, up to the F at the 10th fret of the G string. Down another minor sixth, just everything taken down a whole step. So that's starting on the G, up to that E flat there. Then we're on the F, up to that D, and we come back. So we play up and back, and that's it. So. And obviously, remember, as with all of them, all of this is transcribed there in the lesson material. So again, start out really, really slow, practicing that fill. You know, be careful with the rhythm. Remember, it's going to be 1E and 2E, and it's just groupings of 3 with 16th notes. You have to be careful with the actual gap there. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so. So one more time with the track. Obviously, we can create fills with sevenths and any other intervals, even beyond the octave, but this is all fertile ground for you to explore. Once you learn the intervals within a scale, you can just play around them in any way you like. Now, as well as running up and down the neck with individual intervals, we can also create fills that make use of multiple intervals and that stack them upon each other, even in a single position. This next fill does exactly that, making use of both consecutive fourths and fifth intervals, all in one area. So for some of you, this might be quite a tricky fill, so don't worry about it if you can't get it under your fingers. When you start stringing these fourths together, it can be quite tricky for both hands. But let's have a look at what I'm playing there. So it sounds like this. So still C Dorian. We start on the 4th here down at the B flat, so we work up a perfect 4th to the E flat, so that's 1st fret, A string and D string. But then we play C, F and B flat. That's those consecutive 4th intervals, and it has a certain sound. Whenever you put those kind of 4ths together, it's got that cool kind of spacey sound. If any of you have seen any of the original series of Star Trek, you're going to have heard these 4ths. So that's all 3rd fret of A, D and G string. So 1st fret, then 3rd fret, then I'm going to come down on the 5th fret, down C, G and D. So 5th fret on the G, D and A strings. So I'm using the 1st finger for the first 2 sets, and then I'm just using the 3rd finger to come down on the next set. Now, that might seem quite tricky. You know, I'm fully aware of that, but, you know, it's something to work on, something to build on. Then we work up to the G, and then the D, so this is a perfect 5th. So like I said, we're combining the intervals here. So that's 5th fret on the D string and 7th fret on the G string. Then we play up and down, and then we slide down from that G down to the F, and then we work up to the C. So 3rd fret A string, 3rd fret D string, 5th fret on the G string. Then after we've come back down to the F, we just play the D, 5th fret of the A string to lead us back into the C. So. And that D still has a ring of that perfect 4th because we've just, we've just been playing these lines. It leads back in quite nicely with that kind of thematic approach. So, like I said, I know this can be quite tricky, so don't worry if you can't get it under your fingers. It's just an example of how you might be able to string a lot of these together. So, if you do want to get it down, just, be aware that you've got to do quite a lot of joint barring here and just take it very, very slowly. And then you can just build up speed. And then we can try it with the track. Okay, so as homework, try creating 5 fills from any scale that you like. Dorian, Mixolydian, Major, Lydian, whatever. Choose a scale or mode, create a riff from that scale, then experiment with a variety of intervals in that scale. So once you've picked a scale, whether it's Mixolydian, Dorian, Lydian, Major, whatever it is, work on the 3rds, 4ths, 5ths, and any other intervals that you want to combine. Play through the intervals of the scale just to familiarize yourself with the harmonic landscape, and then get creative. Now, using intervals from scales in this way can take some practice because you need to learn the intervals for each scale that you use. But by practicing and just experimenting with any scale that you use, you'll gradually develop more vocabulary and intervals that can provide a huge amount of melodic possibilities. So, like I said, the Creative Bassist is on sale at the moment. The sale finishes this weekend, so just click that link in the description for more details if you want to dig a little deeper into what we've looked at today and all of the stuff that goes before that. So, go check it out, and I'll see you next week.